um, chapter 2, verse Mishna 12 in today's thing. And just by way of an introduction, we're going to be discussing a statement from, once again, one of the great students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was as I mentioned previously, he was the person that, to a certain degree, saved the Jewish world after the destruction of the temple, and that's the era that we face ourselves now. Of course, on Saturday night, Sunday, we will be commemorating the destruction of the Second Temple and the First Temple, both temples. It's the saddest day in the Jewish calendar, starting from the spies coming back with a negative report and Jewish people crying, and then from all generations that became the day that many, many sad occurrences have happened historically. This era that we're talking about within our Pirkei, our Shir, is just after that Second Temple destruction. That's when the people that are living, that's when they lived, and they are the students of the great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was largely responsible for saving the Jewish people. Hey Joe, welcome, good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay. So Rabbi Yossi, let me share my screen for you. Today's student is Rabbi Yossi. Now Rabbi Yossi was known as Rabbi Yossi HaChassid, Rabbi Yossi the pious. What it means when we call somebody pious, it means that he was a person that always went beyond what was required of him. The word chassid, traditionally we think of chassid as being followers of the Baal Shem Tov and all the successive offshoots of that. That's what we think of chassidim. Funnily enough, the word chassid dates way back, all the way back to the time of, at least the time of the Mishna and the time of temple times. And when they had a person that was particularly scrupulous in Jewish law, they called him a chassid, because chassidim were people that would go beyond. There was a requirement, the halachic requirement, and then there was doing more than you're halachically required to do, and that was called a chassid. And that's why some people call today's day and age, the Haredi community, they like to call them ultra-Orthodox, because some people think that some of the things they do is beyond what is required. So, just an understanding. But the reason why the Baal Shem Tov and his followers got the name Hasidim is actually as a result of the opponents making fun of them, saying, oh, these people think that they are going beyond their requirements, and thereby calling them Hasidim, which was initially to make fun of them because they were, being very strict in particular areas, which is what the Baal Shem Tov taught. And they were very strict about their prayer and their joy and their kashrut and things like that. And I suppose till to this day, Hasidim tend to be at least strict about some of those things. And the name stuck. So we kind of like the name. You give somebody a compliment by mistake, and you like it, you kind of keep it. And that's what happened with the name Hasidim. So Rabbi Yossi over here in our Mishnah was known as a pious person, and you'll see how he goes beyond the letter of the law in his first statement. Let's look at his statement. He says like this: Yehi mamon chavercha chaviv alecha keshelach. May the money of your fellow be as precious to you as your own. Now, straight away, we see that this is a statement of a pious person, because halachically, you do not have to take better care or the same equal care of somebody else's money as you do, as your own. You have to take at least equal care to a certain degree, but you should take care. But he's saying, one of the ways that we understand him is that he's saying, just like you worry about your own financial well-being, to the same degree, you should be worrying about your fellow's financial stability. And therefore, if you see someone that's not financially stable, don't just say, well, what can I do to help them, basically, but help them to the nth degree so that they're actually in a position of comfortability, to the same way that you would be worrying about yourself. So this would not be a halachic requirement. This is beyond the level of what you're required to do, to take care of others as much as you take care of yourself. Most of us would find that close to impossible, right? So the basic understanding of the statement, Yehi mamon chavercha chaver alecha k'shelach, is when sometimes, if you would have seen, if I were to go back, you'll see something interesting. Look over this. No, I don't see it. If you look over here, and when we bought statements from them earlier, it's a fascinating thing. We asked them what's a positive trait and a negative trait. Rabbi Yossi said the negative trait was a shachen ra, a bad friend. Rabbi Shimon actually goes into a specific of what's a bad trait, and he says, haloveh ve'ena mishalem. A negative trait is somebody that borrows but doesn't pay back, which I thought would have been perfectly equated with Rabbi Yossi, who says that you have to equate your money with your fellow's money, right? But interestingly enough, it ends up being a statement of the following person. And he says when you borrow money from somebody else, it's like you're borrowing from God, and you don't repay. So that's just one interesting point. First point we have is being careful and scrupulous about other people's money. Two ways we can understand that. One way you understand it is simply making sure never to misuse other people's funds, or also the second way to understand it is to make sure that your friend is taken care of as much as you would be careful about your own care. Okay? Now, let's look at the next part of the statement, and then I'd like to have some feedback from you guys before we get into a more deeper discussion about it. The next point is, it says, "V'hasken atzmacha lilmod Torah." Perfect yourself to study Torah. Why? She'eina yerusha lecha, because it hasn't been inherited to you. What does this mean? I would like to know, what do you guys think of this statement? It says, prepare yourself to study Torah, perfect yourself, because it's not inherited to you. What does that mean to you? Anybody want to give a... Go ahead, Noach.
Okay, so maybe a couple of things. Maybe one, it doesn't go without saying that you just got it because we're so good that we just got it, so it's forever ours, and that we deserve it. Second thing is maybe that the stuff in there we actually need to learn, that it doesn't, it's not necessarily logical. Like don't kill is one thing, but kashrut may be another. So.
What was that other thing? Don't think it's necessarily logical.
Yeah, so for instance, don't kill someone is logical, but tefillin or kashrut is not necessarily logical.
So
I
like that.
You need to learn.
Interpretation.
Yeah.
I really like that interpretation.
I like that. Yeah. Okay, could I add to it that I'm just looking at the words there, is the Torah itself is our inheritance. However, the study of Torah has to be earned.
Okay. Okay, good. Good, nice. Mark, did you want to say something about that?
Just think on a very basic level, an inheritance goes without saying. The moment you're the child of somebody, it's almost a fait accompli that you're going to get it. Right. But you have to actually work for something.
So you say
it's not an inheritance.
So you got to work for it. So the basic understanding, I think, is 100% correct, like what you're saying. That would be the basic, is that you actually have to understand, you have to actually work for it in order to get it. It doesn't just come to you.
Also, you have to grow towards it. It doesn't actually exist. It's like the tree that falls in the forest when nobody's there to hear it. If you don't embrace Torah, then there is no Torah.
Yeah, okay, I like that, and I think that definitely seems to be the basic understanding of the statement. Let me, David, do you want to add anything before we go on? No? Okay, let me just throw a little bit of, what's the word when you throw something in? What am I looking for? What's the word?
A curveball.
A curveball, thank you.
Tangent?
Not a tangent, not a tangent,
Okay.
A curveball. So let's just take, have you heard the Rebbe instituted 12 or 10 verses that are, or 12 verses that he believed from all Torah and rabbinic literature, whatever, that are primarily statements that bring divinity into the world. And if you go to a Chabad children's event, we will, most of the time they'll get children standing up and saying these verses. But this first verse, the verse number 1 that they say, is actually from Dvarim. And it's actually the first verse that not just Chabad, everybody, Halakha says the first verse that you're supposed to teach your children. This is the verse. Look what it says. Torah tziva lanu Moshe, the Torah that Moshe commanded, morasha kilat Yaakov. It's inheritance, or it's a heritage to the congregation of Jacob. Right? Seemingly that would contradict what we just spoke about in the Pirkei Avot. Right? So Mark said that clearly said that it's not an inheritance, as in we got to work for it. That's a basic understanding. So what does it mean over here when it says that we tell our children, and we tell all Jews, but this is the first thing we're supposed to teach our children, by the way. Halacha says, when your children learn how to talk, teach them this verse first. Teach them Torah tziva lanu Moshe, that they should know that God commanded Moshe with the Torah, and that is inheritance to the Jewish people. What does that mean? Right? He just said over here that it's not an inheritance to you.
Yeah, I don't think it's contradicting.
Okay.
I think that if you don't learn Torah, and in lots of cases not learning Torah at all, or not knowing about your Jewishness in a way, is leading to itbalalut. And through itbalalut, you're going to end up with a case where it's not yours anymore.
Okay. So what does it mean, the inheritance? What does it mean over here? What is the meaning over here?
I think that it's available. It is available, but you have to meet halfway. You have to come out and get it. The same as going up to greet the Torah when it comes out of the Aron HaKodesh.
100%. So that's the way it's explained by the Rebbe, that it's teaching us this, that the Torah, and I think you both touched on this point, the Torah is an inheritance to us in the sense that it's available to us. It's available to us if we want it. It's there, we've got to get it. In other words, you don't have to be, what it's basically saying is you don't have to be the child of a rabbi or a scholar or anything in order to get it. Everybody can get it. You've got to just open the book and work and learn. But on the other hand, if you want to truly understand it, don't expect that you're going to get it simply by doing a basic understanding or by being Jewish. You know, one of my favorite, but at the same time least favorite stories on this point is about this panel of this. It was a panel of leading figures in Jewish thought, and one of the people on the panel was a Chabad rabbi. The other one of the other people, I don't know if he was a Reform rabbi or he was just some type of secular scholar, Jewish secular scholar. Anyway, the secular scholars stood up and they were talking about the relevance of Judaism today and the Torah. And he stood up and he said, the Torah is not relevant anymore. It's a great book, but it's no longer relevant. And the rabbi stood up and said, well, I'm sure you obviously, you're a great scholar. You're obviously talking from a perspective of knowledge and experience. Can I ask you a question? What are the 5 books of Moses? And the guy was struggling to get it. He says, okay, you actually started with a more difficult question. What are the 52 portions of the Torah? And that's a complicated question. Oh, I don't know who says that they were divided this way. Yeah. What are the 5 books of Moses? And he couldn't answer. He says, I don't understand. I wouldn't come and give an explanation to scientists on a topic that I totally don't understand, explaining how DNA works, etc., and telling them that it's no longer relevant if I don't specialize in that field or if I haven't even learned the basics. How can you say the Torah is not relevant if you haven't, obviously to make such an opinion, you would have to have a lot of knowledge. However, the thing is like this, how does such an expression happen? Most Jews feel like they can make such a statement, whether it's relevant or that it's not relevant. They feel because they know that they've got a natural connection. So this statement is telling us this, we have a natural connection to the Torah. But if you want to gain the Torah, if you want the Torah to become yours and truly to understand it, then you have to go back to this and remember you're not going to truly get it unless you put in the effort. You have to really work hard. And at the same time, remember that if you're not the child of a scholar or a rabbi, it's there just for you. You don't have to be the child of a wealthy person in the same way. It's there. When it comes to money, money can be inherited by one to the other. But knowledge is not inherited. Knowledge is taught or learned. So you actually have to work hard in order to get it.
Rabbi, is there another element to this, the reverse, like in inheritance, there's such a thing as disinheritance as well. Whenever you talk about inheritance, the opposite also exists. So can Jewish people be disinherited from the Torah?
Well, that's what this one's telling us. No, they can't.
They can't be disinherited because not inheritance to begin with.
No, they can't be inheritance because they have no choice. It's given to them. It's there. They can't be disinherited from it. They can decide not to study and not to work on it and not to gain the knowledge.
Okay, I'll reword what I asked. When someone is cut off from the Jewish people as a punishment, are they cut off from the Torah as well?
Okay, that's a complicated, full-on question. That's a very full-on question because you're entering into the whole realm of what does karet mean. Karet being to cut off, which is a very good question. I'm not saying it's not a relevant question. And I'll just try to answer it in one foot to the best of my understanding. And that is that karet is something which is a spiritual connection, feeling that a person can feel. It will cause a person to have a feeling of disassociation. But at the same time, one of the fundamental concepts within Judaism is that we have an intrinsic connection to the Torah and to God, whether we like it or not. And it's always there. The problem is when we get something like karet, we will not feel that connection. So everybody has that connection. The question is whether or not you feel it. That's the difference. Okay, David, you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, so if you're a boy, you would have to unbris yourself, to disinherit yourself.
I suppose even if you did that, I don't think you could ruin your connection. Your connection doesn't come. I hear what you're saying, but I don't think you're. Well, it's considered one of the gravest sins to do. By the way, is to unbris yourself. People, in the time we're told that in the time of the Hasmoneans in the Hanukkah era, because it was considered a blemish on the body, many Jews try to reverse their bris, their circumcision.
They did it to compete too in the public arenas.
To compete in the public arenas, that's right. Something fascinating. In order to get into an Israeli elite or any combat unit in the Israeli army, you have to go for a physical, right? And if you want to get into some of the elite units, you have to get full marks. Do you know what full marks on Israeli health test is? It's something like 97%. Why? Because they automatically expect you to have a 3% reduction because you've had a surgery on the circumcision. They actually consider that a 3% reduction. I didn't know that. I had a friend that was my chavrusa in yeshiva, and then he wanted to get into elite brigade, which he did get in. He got into Duf Duvan, which is one of the most elite brigades in the Israeli army. And he came back, and while he was in yeshiva, he came back after his health examination. He said, I got 97%. I said, what did you get the 3% off for? He said, it was my bris, but he still got in. But anyway, thank God most kids in Israel are actually getting circumcised and it's not really affecting them, but it is considered having, some type of impact on, I don't think it has any health impact, and that's why it doesn't affect them. And we know that the Israeli army is definitely not in any way less than any other army. except for the fact that we care about lives, which sometimes is to our, it doesn't always help us, I suppose. Let's go on a bit. There's a lot more that we can talk about this. There's one more point that I want to make about this. There's a thing about the Torah. You know, have you ever heard one of the most famous Jewish songs is Hashem gave us a present. Do you know what it was? Have you heard that song? It's a very famous. If your kids went to definitely a Chabad kinder, but most kinders, that's a song that they would sing in kinder, especially before Shavuot. But that's one of the facts that we actually talk about later on in Pirkei Avot, that the Torah is called a matana, a present. On the one hand, we call it an acquisition. You have to acquire it. So it tells us that the Torah has three elements to it. Number one, is an inheritance. Number two, it's an acquisition. And number three, it's a gift. And we're told that if you have a natural connection to the Torah, therefore it's a morasha. It's inherited to you. So you have to know, no matter where you are, or no matter what you've done in your life, you have a natural connection to the Torah. No one can stand up and say, I have no connection. Not only that, everybody has what to add to the Torah. No one can say, oh, that guy has nothing to add. Of course, there's principles of how we add lessons in Torah. You can't go against the Torah and say, then I'm adding a lesson. No, as long as you're within the principles of the Torah and you're not changing the Torah, you can add new ideas to the Torah. Everyone has that ability as long as you follow the guidelines, right? Number two is, if you want to actually know the Torah, you have to work hard, like an acquisition. You have to put your effort in. That's the acquisition. You have to acquire it. And number three is, and then you own it, it becomes yours. It's something like you own. You could tell, you could teach other people. And number three is, then it's your present. You get as a gift. You get new insights that you could never. This is what Noach was saying before. What I really liked about what you said. It's something that you will acquire new understanding that is not logical. That is not, you see the Torah from a much deeper and broader perspective than anything you would have been able to understand by itself. Right? That's the gift. The gift is something that you just get. But when you've put in the effort, you're able to reach new heights in Torah that you couldn't have got just by learning something on a basic level. And suddenly you have new ways of understanding the Torah. I want to show you another one of these verses. So there's 12 verses that the Rebbe, discussion for another time, but the Rebbe dedicated 12 verses from all over Torah and biblical discussion. You see over here, there's Deuteronomy, etc. Now, if you look at verse number 10, sorry, it's number 9. This is actually a verse from the Talmud, I believe. Look what it says. Yagaiti v'lo matzasi. If someone says, I have worked hard, but I was not successful, al tamin, do not believe that person. Lo yagati. But if they said, I didn't work hard, umatzasi, but I was successful, al tamin, do not believe them. Yogati umatzasi, when do you believe the person? Only if they say they worked hard and they were successful. Now, this is in all areas of life, that in general, for a person to be successful, they have to put in the effort. But this is particularly when it comes to Torah study, right? There may be tricks in the world of how to make quick money, so to speak, sometimes, even though generally that's not true. There's always better ways to do things that may not require as much effort. But when it comes to Torah study, if you want to truly acquire, when you be truly successful, there's only one way. And that's hard work, hard toil, putting in the effort. Okay, and this is what one of the, it's fascinating how the Rebbe put this concept as one of the 12, primary statements from all of Torah. Can you imagine the Rebbe went around and he went to all of Torah, all of literature, and he chose 12 statements. Actually, the last two are actually from the Tanya, these last two, but that was a discussion for another time. I want to get back to our discussion over here, finish off what we were saying over here. He says, last point, all your actions should be for the sake of heaven. What does this mean, that all your actions should be for the sake of heaven? Anybody want to give an interpretation? So far, the interpretations that you guys have given have been better than mine. So what I'll start with you guys. What do we think this means?
Well, fascinating thing that sticks out for me is it doesn't say for the sake of Hashem, but for heaven. Because if Hashem is everywhere, everything you do will connect back.
Okay.
So for the sake of heaven, L'Shem Shemayim is something higher than just this plane of existence on earth.
Okay. I've never thought about that. I never even paid attention to that. So that's very interesting. I suppose when you grow up with certain terms and you whatever and say something's for the sake of Hashem, you always just use the word Shem Shemayim. But yeah, there obviously is nothing in and you're correct, because nothing in Judaism is arbitrary. And therefore, L'Shem Shemayim, I suppose you can say that for the sake of something which is higher. Anybody else want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, it's not about you.
Sorry, go ahead, Nav.
It's not about you. It's bigger than you.
So what does it mean? So what is this? In other words, explain a little bit more. What are you saying? You're 100% correct, but just try to explain it a bit more.
That everything that you do should have a higher purpose. So
even in your mundane acts, very good. Even when you're going to the bathroom, even when you're just eating your lunch, even when you're making business and you're doing the next inflatable for a soccer well down the road, or you're whatever, you're doing somebody's accounts book, or you're helping somebody volunteer, whatever you're doing, you're helping somebody's website. Recognize and see within that. Don't look at your mundane acts as mundane acts. See godliness within them. You're doing your work, yeah, for the sake. Don't look at it as, oh, I'm just serving myself. No. Look at in your mundane acts, see them as also having a higher purpose, being there for something greater. And that will change your mindset, your perspective, and everything else that you do. I think it's a very powerful statement. By the way, this is considered also, once again, living beyond the letter. Remember we said about Rabbi Yossi HaChassid. One of the primary teachings of Chassidus, there's many primary, but one of the main primary teachings was actually this line, that whenever we do something, we should look at it as though it's not just a mundane act. We should never look at our lives as being mundane lives. It's not like I go to shul and there I'm a good Jew, and then I go home and then I'm just a normal person. No. Even when you're at home and you're sleeping in bed, and if you look at Shulchan Aruch, it tells us how to tie our shoelaces, how to get dressed, how to sleep, how to eat, everything. Why? Because God wants us to live godly lives, and then everything in our lives has meaning. Everything has a higher purpose to it. Whether we have a lockdown or not, Judaism is able to thrive in any circumstances. Any change to society, Judaism will always be there. You know why? Because of the statement. Because whenever we're doing something, we'll see the godliness and the divinity and the higher purpose within it. I wanted to conclude with one or two just short stories in connection to today's learning. The first one I'll talk to you about is this statement, that the value of your fellow's money. There's a great story about the Rebbe, that there was a guy by the name of Zalman Schachter. Have any of you heard of Zalman Schachter? He was originally a Chabad Chassid, very wise and smart man, but he eventually moved away from Chabad, and the Rebbe sent him and Shlomo Carlebach, they were colleagues, to become the first campus shluchim, and unfortunately it caused them to create their own direction and path. And they kind of lost a formal connection to the Rebbe, but they still held the Rebbe as a leader, but they didn't believe in the scrupulous, stringent ways of the Chabad movement, but they liked the ideology. So as a result, Zalman Schachter actually opened his own separate organization. And the one time the Rebbe asked Rebbe Vremel Shem Tov, who had been a very close contact with Zalman Schachter, but he was also the leader, the head of one of Chabad's major organizations. And the Rebbe asked him, tell me something, how is Zalman Schachter doing? This was after Zalman Schachter had already left. He said, he's doing well. from what I hear. So he says, tell me, do you know how he's doing? He said to him, is he your friend? And he said, yes. He said, so tell me, how is he doing financially? And Avraham Shem Tov replied, I don't know. So the Rebbe said, what kind of friend are you if you don't know how he's doing financially? So it's just an incredible thing for me that you think about a guy like the Rebbe. This is a man that had moved away, almost kind of rebelled from his organization, from being really respected. And what did he want to say? He was concerned, about the financial situation of this other fellow that had moved away. But he also wanted to teach you that if you want to be a true friend, you have to also know, a true friend knows how his fellow is doing, and particularly financially. No, obviously it's not just financially, but that's just one element. It's a powerful story. And in connection to this statement, there's many stories that we can say, but the Tzemach Tzedek had a few stories. The Tzemach Tzedek was the third Chabad Rebbe. His name was the same name as our Rebbe, and his wife had the same name as the Rebbe's wife. His name was Menachem Mendel. His wife was Chaim Mushka, just like me and my wife as well. And the Rebbe was a direct descendant of him, not of the other three, the three predecessors. So he was the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe once gave him a blessing, and he said, I can give you a blessing that Torah should be given to you as a gift, as acquired to you. And he said to the Alter Rebbe, no, I want to have the concept of studying, of working hard. And therefore he didn't want the Torah just to be given to him, so to speak. He was a genius. He's one of the greatest rabbis in the last couple of centuries. And he's written works on all of Hasidus and Halacha and tremendous work. Afterwards, after his grandfather already passed away, he related to, I think it was to his son, that he regretted not getting that blessing, because he said, even if I would have got that on any level, no matter what level of knowledge you have, you can always work harder. So if you get the one level of Torah, and that's given to you as a gift, that will give you the ability to work hard in a much higher level. And so that's why he regretted it. But there was once a person that came to the Tzemach Tzedek, and he said, what should I do? I don't enjoy studying Torah. I just don't enjoy it. So the Tzemach Tzedek said, if you break yourself to learn while you prefer to be busy with other things, he merits to reach much greater heights in his Torah knowledge. So he said, in other words, if you that don't want to learn and you still push yourself to learn, you will reach tremendous heights in your Torah knowledge. So then the Tzemach Tzedek said, and what can I do that I love learning, so I don't ever have to break myself to learn? I have to break myself to do anything else. So anyway, the lesson to us is, if we enjoy learning, learn. And if we don't enjoy learning, by breaking ourselves to learn, we are able to reach tremendous heights. Okay, we'll stop there. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask, comments, disagreements.
I think that last story relates back to we can't see it anymore, it's not on the screen, but it says, Vehatken atzmecha, and the English translation was perfect yourself. So it says, Vehatken atzmecha lilmod Torah, and the English translation says perfect yourself to study Torah. So it's, I find it almost off-putting, because what do you mean you got to perfect yourself? I think it's Hatken atzmecha. It's supposed to mean that you got to likvoa itim. You need to make specific times to learn Torah rather than perfect yourself, which is what we're doing now. You need to actually have set times for yourself to learn Torah. So
100%.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily about Kriyat Itim, because there's another statement that we're going to come across later on about being Koveya Itim specifically, and there it says specifically Koveya Itim. I think the basic understanding of the statement is correct. It doesn't fit well with the English translation. most commentaries understand it as saying simply be prepared to work hard to study Torah. In other words, don't come to Torah thinking, oh, I'll just get the knowledge. I'll just go and it'll be a breeze, because then it won't be an inheritance. Then it won't really be connected to you. But if you do put in the effort, you will surely connect to it in a very powerful way.
Sure.
What's the shorish of the word pahatken? What's your
Tikkun.
understanding of that?
Tikkun.
Tikkun, or what's the word for knife? Sharpening a knife?
No, that's a sakin, but that's what's a samach.
No,
The
that's-
samech. Okay.
And samach and a chaf, it's a totally different word.
Okay, I wasn't sure because I thought
Yeah.
about polishing the.
Yeah,
know,
no, but sakin is it's just the name of the utensil. So anything you do with it is a different word. It doesn't come from the shorish of the word sakin.
Okay.
So when you're cutting something, it's a different word. It doesn't come from that shorish.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's no
Laptop.
analogy there.
This comes. So the reason why they said perfect is because from the word tikkun means to rectify yourself. But most people look at it more as prepare yourself for hard toil. That's the
Right.
most people understand. As in prepare yourself, rectify yourself, and be prepared for what's going to come in order to inherit the Torah.
Doesn't the word heal come from the same shorish? To heal yourself, to heal the world? Tikkun olam?
Tikkun olam, yeah, but that's more to heal is really lerapot, is really to cure. But you can also say to fix.
To fix, to
There
complete.
could be a connection. Yeah.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, tikkun olam comes from.
It's just the same word can mean two different things.
Mm.
So
Imagine that. Nothing like English.
tikkun, that's right. Tikkun olam is more like healing, whereas tikkun here is prepare. Different word.
Yeah.
That's Ken. To complete. To complete yourself. Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Rabbi. I've got to
All
go.
right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a talk on Saturday night. You can come in person to the golf course or join via Zoom. I'll post the details on the price.
If we're not in lockdown.
Yeah, but either way, it'll be on Zoom either way. So, okay, Crusaders and the Jews by Zach Goma. It's going to be a fascinating talk, and we'll be doing the Megillah Eicha as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good Shabbos, a good weekend. Bye.
Thanks, Rabbi. Thanks.
Good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Thank you.